So
There we
welcome,
go.
Nick.
Thanks. Yeah, my name is Nick Crosetti. I work at the Whole Foods here in Kansas City, in the Brookside neighborhood. Um, I've been with the company for more than 20 years. Technically, I'm the cheese guy, but having been with Whole Foods for so long and just one who enjoys cooking and food in general, um, I know a lot more about the rest of the store than just the cheese, although cheese is definitely my expertise. So, yeah, when it comes to olive oil, um, you know, where I feel really lucky working at Whole Foods, just being exposed to so much every day. We have something in the neighborhood of 30 different olive oils available. So, um, we within the store definitely uh, do what we can to share our knowledge and try things because it is a lot to take in. So being able to get to taste and sample and try new things, including olive oil, is worked out really well. So yeah, when it comes to olive oil and olive cultivation in general, it's always been particularly interesting to me just how far back it goes. Olives and the production and use of olive oil uh, stretches back uh, in the neighborhood of 7,000 years. It's one of the earliest crops that humans latched onto and tried to cultivate for use in their lives. In ancient times, too, I mean, it was used for just about everything in everyday life, whether it was as a food or to make soap. It was used as medicines. It was an anointment in religious ceremonies. Olympians used to douse themselves in it before competition. It was burned for light. So olive oil goes way, way back and was hugely important to um, ancient civilizations and people. Uh, Mentioned not only by Homer but Hippocrates too. This stuff is essential to what it is to be human. It seems like. Um, so moving it forward to today, olive oil production is a massive, massive industry. It tops out somewhere in the neighborhood of $14 billion a year. The biggest producers, Spain, Italy, Turkey, Portugal, they even and then California is catching up, or more and more olives are starting to come from California to the tune of nearly 4 million gallons in that one little state. So um, olive oil still continues to be hugely, hugely important all over the world, um, and doesn't show any signs of slowing down. When it is an agricultural product, which I think being one of these ubiquitous things that we all seem to have and use all the time, it's really important to remember that it's very dependent on how what the crop yields were and whether or not there was disease or climate change or something that affected the growing season. So um, I have certainly noticed like fluctuations in pricing and availability for certain things, and definitely something I would have you take away is that idea that as much as there is to go around and we always seem to be able to find it, there are tracing back the production process, somebody with a farm somewhere trying to get it to you. So um, really important to remember, just like a piece of fruit or a banana or seasonality of anything else that we would consider agricultural, olive oil falls into that category. Um, there are many different types of olives used in production. Globally, if I remember right, there's somewhere in the neighborhood of like 170 widely used olives, or widely cultivated olives throughout the world. In olive oil production, there's somewhere in the neighborhood of 30 to 40 that really hold a lion's share of the production space, mainly owing to their hardiness, like how much they're affected by changes in climate or growing conditions, pests, and their yield. So some olives are very large and meaty and produce more oil than others. The two big varieties that are most commonly used are Arbequina and Picual. And those two olives make up 10% of all olive oil production. Of all olives grown in the world, 90% of it goes to olive oil production. The remaining 10% is what we have in table olives. So yeah, the fact that these two olives really are what we have come to know as olive oil is pretty impressive. I did a little digging on the shelf at Whole Foods. This is a picture of our olive oil set at Whole Foods. These are all the different olives we have in all different varietal olive oils we have at Whole Foods today. Like I said, it does change, but pretty extensive selection from all over the world. Some of them blends, some of them single varietals, each of them unique though. And really that's what is so interesting to me and fun as someone who just likes to play with their food and try new things. So come on down to Whole Foods and try. As ancient as olive oil production and cultivation is, the process hasn't really changed all that much. It's gotten a little more streamlined or mechanical, but really you've got a fruit, it's full of oil, you need to smash it to get the oil out of it, and that's it. Generally speaking, there's a 6-step process. From harvest, the olives are ground up. They're then just mixed in what is a process called maxillation, and that gives sort of uniformity to what is a big slurry of mashed up olives and pits, and from there, typically there's a spinning or centrifugal process that helps separate the oil and water within the fruit from the pulp. From there, it's racked or filtered, or racked and filtered, which really just gives further separation of the oil from everything else. And lastly, it's bottled and tested for purity and grading purposes. And really, outside of some of the machines to do this process for us, this process hasn't changed in 7,000 years, where it may have, there was more of a hand mixing or crushing with a horse and a big stone wheel. Now there's machines to kind of help with that, but really the simple process of extracting oil from this fruit is really remains to this day. So another interesting like connection to the past in my mind. The first step is obviously harvesting olives. Olives are an interesting fruit. They ripen at very different rates, even on one tree. So while an entire orchard can ripen at different rates depending on microclimates within it, olives on the same branch can ripen at very different rates, being right next to each other. So harvesting at just the right time is really sort of an art unto itself, and will dictate the results of the final product. Getting too many unripe or green olives will yield a certain flavor profile, as opposed to too many ripe ones, which might not have the oil content that you need. So geography plays a big part too. The olives grown in the southern part of Greece have a much longer growing season, just based on the fact of their geographic location and the cooler climate that they are produced in. So there's a lot to know and keep tabs on when harvesting olives for olive oil production. The methods of harvest are particularly interesting too to me. The widely used and traditional method, this I'll try to pronounce it, abbacciatura, is really it's just hitting the tree with a big stick. It's just as this picture depicts. It's a man with a long stick hitting the branches, knocking the olives onto a net that he collects after he's done, and that's the way to get the olives. It's a widely used process because of that variable growth rate within the tree. You can kind of select that these olives over on this half of the tree are what we're looking for, as the ones on the others might not. So it really does give a precise harvesting quality to this end result, and give a more consistent outcome. There's also like a long rake or a comb that is frequently used in this hand method. But really the idea of somebody hitting a tree full of ripe olives goes all the way back to ancient Greece. And if it ain't broke, you know, a lot of people still do it that way. There are other methods, much more modern and arguably efficient. This picture here on the right is a machine that has almost like an inverted umbrella that opens up around the bottom of the tree and then shakes the whole tree, catching all the olives into its big net, and then they're scooped off into a container. Pretty fun and impressive machine to watch. I would definitely have people make a Google search of olive harvest, seeing this tree. With this method, it's pretty slick, pretty fun to see this machine drive up to a tree, unfold, shake it, and watch all the fruit fall off and move on to the next. This other machine actually drives over the top of the trees, and while the tree is inside the machine, there's a comb and a shaking that happens that kind of pulls the olives off, as well as letting them fall down. And within the machine, they're sorted and collected all in one fell swoop. So this machine is very, very efficient and can drive up and down the rows in an orchard and make very quick work of an olive harvest. So from beating a tree with a stick to driving one of these very specialized machines over it, there's a lot of variation there. From there, the olives are ground up. Stone mills were the original preferred method, and many are still in use today. This one here is drawn by a horse walking around the stone circle, and the olives are poured in and turned into this slurry, which is called pumice. The whole olive is used, so the pits included, and it's really just a matter of breaking down the structure of the fruit and the cells to give you this thick slurry that will later be refined into just the oil. There's also something called a hammer mill, which is kind of like a big garbage disposal almost. It's got spinning teeth that produce the same result, and is pretty widely used. From what I could find, these are really the two main methods of grinding olives. That pit makes it a little tough to work around. So these two ways seem to work. Nobody's complaining. We'll keep going. From there, that pomace, that slurry, is mixed in any number of fashions, from a big vat with sort of spinning paddles to sort of screw shaped stirring things, and during this process, there's careful monitoring of the pomace to make sure that there is a really even distribution of oil and water. This process allows the oils to kind of aggregate and clump together, and for easier separation. There's also a kind of a fermentation that begins to happen at this stage, just based on the natural enzymes and yeast that are in the air on the fruit, that contribute to the breakdown of the fats and the sugars in the fruit to produce unique aromas and flavors to each individual type of olive or end product. Sometimes there is a certain amount of heat applied at this stage to expedite the process and kind of make it a little more efficient. But there are, as we'll talk about in a moment, regulations on how much heat can be applied in terms of the end grade of the product. So pressure sometimes also used at this stage to drive some more of the olive or the oil out of the pomace, and does help expedite things. But again, it gets a little sticky there depending on what type of oil you're trying to produce. Ancient times, water was frequently added, mixed into the slurry to help drive out more of the oil or ease in the separation of the oil from the rest of the slurry. But generally, it's not used as much today because it lowers the quality. It tends to oxidize or speed oxidization in the maxillation process. So from there, historically, once you had this initial separation, the paste was just placed into bags or baskets and pressed, or even allowed to hang and allow the oil to slowly leach and drip out. There is some of that done today, at very least, like the pressing, but more often than not, there's a spinning or a centrifuge that helps drive the oil separate from the bulk of the pomace. This little animation here kind of gives an example where the pomace is being fed in, and as it kind of spins around, the oil separates from the solids and the water and is diverted away, whereas the rest goes off. It's definitely a much faster method. It takes a lot longer to let gravity do the job of separation than a machine like this might do. So this is a very common method used today. From there, from this step, the oil that is spun off is stored in large tanks, and just kind of left to sit. There, the further separation naturally happens. Sometimes there is a second centrifuge at this point, or a filtration. But this process of racking is very common in winemaking, in beer making, in olive oil production, just allowing the residual solids, oil or waters to separate from what you're after, that pure form of oil. There is if filtering is used, there's all different methods, whether they be fine mesh screens or cloth. Diatomaceous earth and charcoal are sometimes added, as they'll bind to impurities and water and can then be filtered out. And it's really just a proprietary choice of the manufacturer whether or not they want their product to go through that process. Oftentimes it will affect the overall shelf life or the volatile flavor compounds of the oil, resulting in just a certain product, not necessarily a worse product, but one with less character and vibrancy. So yeah, depending on what you're going for, it may be filtered out, just to expedite the process too. Again, letting something sit in a big tank and do its work slowly is just costs money when we're talking about an agricultural thing, right? So filtering is fairly common, but to what level just depends on the product. And once it's been fully racked or filtered to specifications, it's tested and bottled. Testing is looking for acidity and fat content primarily. That falls into grading, but there's also a sensory analysis component. Many times places will blend different oils or different stock to produce a uniform kind of result. So if you're looking for an oil with end result is particularly peppery, you may add a different oil or a different varietal oil. Most importantly, it's always going to be bottled in a dark glass or metal container for any kind of quality oil, because light is a major contributor to a loss of the volatile components, the antioxidants in olive oil, and will lead ultimately to rancid, to spoilage. So you always want to have olive oil in a dark glass, if not metal, container. Yeah. So big question that we get a lot at the store asks about grading, and what is virgin olive oil or extra virgin olive oil? What do I use for my everyday cooking? So yeah, there are 5 main grades of olive oil. They each with each grade, another step in the process is added. So if we're talking about virgin oils, they're the first pressing. There's limited or no heat applied during the process, and they meet definite standards of acidity and fat content. So most everything we have at Whole Foods is at least a virgin olive oil. It's definitely the most commonly available commercial oil in stores, but you do find pure or edible, sometimes called oils, olive oils in the store, and they are a mixture of virgin oils and refined, which is the next step that typically goes through an additional chemical step of removing impurities of further extraction of the oil from the pomace. They tend to be very, very neutral oils, being, almost clear as opposed to green or yellow, and higher in this lampante, which is a very high acid content component of olive oils. And when it's refined out, it's used as fuel. It's what is the like flammable component of the oil. Typically, it comes from a second pressing. So whereas during the centrifuge stage, the oil will be pumped off and allowed to rack, and the pomace will be disposed of. It can be pressed again with hot water or pressure or chemical additives to get this high acid, like not unpalatable fuel source out of it. So there's still oil to be had in the pomace, but it's not a food source. So refined will have a high component of that because of sort of an interim step or a chemical addition to the process, whereas the lamp oil or pomace oil are really just that. They're extracted completely for their flammable properties or used in commercial applications as lubricants, or they're not something you would want to eat. So while they still come from olives, they're way down on the list on things you might even be fine. I've only seen pomace oil in like hardware stores, so I would not something I would confuse for what I want to cook food with or use in a salad dressing or something. The term extra virgin versus virgin is a constant source of confusion. Extra virgin is just the most virgin olive oil, so all extra virgin is virgin. It really just has the least amount of process, and the acidity is less than or equal to 0.8%. That classifies it as extra virgin. Anything between 0.8 and 2% acidity is graded as virgin. So the least processed, minimally defective, most volatile, unrefined oils fall into the extra virgin category, and really are meant to be they're meant as a drizzle or a celebration of the oil or the olive, the fruit, than they are a cooking fat. So many virgin oil is perfectly fine to use as cooking fat, something to saute. Extra virgin olive oil, especially at certain tiers of quality, a lot of the organoleptics are just going to be lost in the cooking process. They're kind of meant to be savored on their own. So yeah, as a cooking fat, extra virgin olive oil, relatively high smoke point, which is that point at which the hot oil will begin to smoke and set off the fire alarms in your kitchen. So compared to vegetable oil, olive oil falls, in the 375 to 385 degree range, in line with butter, lard. So useful in the same capacity, but not so much as peanut oil, avocado, which have higher smoke points and really better suited to deep frying things. So deep frying something in olive oil is probably not a great idea, but certainly using it to saute, to brown, to keep things from sticking is perfectly fine. We kind of talked about the higher quality single varietal extra virgin olive oils really are designed more as a condiment, as a singular thing than a pantry staple cooking fat. So I tend to have my virgin cooking oil available for whatever is going on the stove, and then something a little more interesting or a higher grade of something to use on fresh vegetables or tomatoes in a salad, things like that, that have their own character, that kind of enhance the dish rather than cook the dish. The biggest things to remember with olive oil, no matter the grade, is to keep them away from light. That dark glass bottle or metal container, in a cool place, ideally not next to the stove or above the stove is pretty common for people to have, but not necessarily in the refrigerator. I remember a few years back going around, the refrigerator test was a thing, to make sure you had good olive oil, that you weren't getting duped by labeling mistakes. It involved putting your olive oil in the refrigerator, and if it clumped together, then it was good olive oil. If it didn't clump together, then there was something else in there. By and large, I mean that there's a fair that's fairly accurate. Olive oil will tend to congeal at refrigerator temperatures, but it doesn't necessarily indicate that there's some other oil or a lower grade oil in there. It has to do with other flavor components that are present in all of it. So it's not the most accurate test, but it can give you an indication of the legitimate olive oil content in whatever you purchase. All to say, olive oil should be kept cool, room temperature, not away from heat and light. Oxygen will speed the rancidity process and oxidize. And really, it is a perishable product. So I would encourage, while the giant jar may be more cost effective, or the huge metal jug, a tempting way to go, if you're not going to use olive oil regularly, to purchase that smaller portion, because really once it's open, 6-8 months tops is really the shelf life. Sealed, that can go well into a year or more, but it's not, it is something that will degrade. It is something that will go bad. And rancid oil is not something you want to be using on your food, and by any means. Some of the difficult thing about having so many olive oils available is knowing what to pick, right? So like I said, I typically will have a blended virgin oil available for everyday use, and then try something new. Pick out a single varietal thing, something of a different, higher quality, just to see what else is available. Of some of the more popular olive types available, some of the notes that you tend to get out of them are like a peppery quality, or a bitter green, like a pleasantly bitter green character. Remembering that this is a fruit, oftentimes that's kind of the way the different oils are described, brand to brand, whether they be green or unripe to a fruitier, sweeter, more like balanced or rounded character. So Pequal, which is widely available, is very stable. So the initial product will remain flavorful throughout its lifespan, and it tends to have kind of a peppery quality, like a black pepper, kind of bite to it. There's a bitterness to it that is pleasant but not overpowering. Hoji Blanca is another very common one that falls more towards an initial kind of sweetness and ripe, fruity character, with much milder, like grassy notes. So, of these two, like they kind of, in my mind, represent the spectrum of what's available, from milder, sweeter, ripe fruit characters to that peppery, bitter nuance. And there's everything in between and blends of both, really. So really, this website here does a great job of breaking down varietals, and giving characteristics commonly associated with their flavors. So I encourage people to look at that. If not, ask people at Whole Foods or any store that you trust the people to know what they're talking about. Because really it is, I haven't even tried everything there is on our shelf. And when I tend to, when I find one that I like, I just stick with it until I feel like I need something else. So experimentation is encouraged. Hopefully this will kind of guide you on that journey. Yeah, so in terms of the health benefits of olive oil, there's a lot there. Olive oil is generally considered a very healthy oil. There is a variety and an abundance of antioxidant properties. It primarily monounsaturated fats, and omega-3s that are easily absorbed, for one thing, into your system. They have anti-inflammatory characteristics. And really, if you want to find health benefits for olive oil, there's no shortage of studies and websites and people out there to tell you olive oil can cure whatever it is that ails you. Taking all this with a grain of salt, what's really most important to remember about olive oil is that it's an easy replacement for less healthy fats. So given its high smoke point or moderate smoke point, it's a high amount of antioxidants and anti-inflammatories, monounsaturated fats. It does contribute to the reduction in coronary heart disease, and especially when compared to similar amounts of saturated fats that we find everywhere else in our foods and our diets. So while it is a healthy fat, and perhaps preferable to other fats, it's still fat. So just like everything, it needs to be consumed in moderation, and especially when with other fats. So it's I find the health benefits can be over exaggerated at times. I use it 90% of the time because it is still, among all the other options, one of the healthiest. And with variety, it comes the most healthy option. So using olive oil I think somebody mentioned avocado oil um, as replacements or instead of or avoiding known unhealthy fats is the way to get the most benefit, most health benefit. I think it's undisputed that the inflammation and what's the word? Antioxidant property among fats in olive oil is very, very high. And it comes with a small dose, I guess you would call it, 2 tablespoons of olive oil a day is the general dose that's talked about, and that will give a maximum benefit as opposed to some of the other oils that claim similar things. So definitely olive oil is good for you, but still a fat, so should watch out for. Yeah, other than that, this website here offers a lot of fun little olive oil trivia and did you knows and tips that are worth perusing if you're further interested. I think, like I said, olive oil to me is one of those easy to substitute things. It's ubiquitous at my house. I mean, we use it on everything. We use it to cook with. It's the base of all of our salad dressings. And there's so much variety available, not just at Whole Foods, but out there. It's a huge industry that you can find olive oil and good olive oil at that. That it's fun to try different things or to experiment with what is a daily product at my house. So if there's any questions, I'd love to try and answer them.
Hi, there was a question from municipal court. We do not want to ignore municipal court, but
Sure.
I think you already answered it because the question was olive oil is not as healthy as one time it was thought. Now all the rage is avocado oil, but I think you kind of answered it already.
Yeah. So it, let's see, what the research or what at least what I hear about coming through the store, it reminds me a lot about eggs. There was a time where eggs were really bad and they were full of fats and you shouldn't eat eggs. And then it was, well, eggs are actually really good for you and they have a lot of they're a very nutrient dense food. And then it's kind of balanced out. Like eggs are good, but you shouldn't eat a dozen eggs every day. From my perspective or what the research that I have available to me and what I hear people asking about is kind of like that olive oil, when initial study on its health benefits came out, was hugely celebrated as this miracle cure for all things. And since then, it's kind of tapered off to be that while it is a very good source of antioxidants, of omega-3s, of anti-inflammatory properties, it's not the be-all end-all. It's not gonna make you healthier just by eating it. It's more about replacing it for other things. So the same is true of avocado oil, where the antioxidant properties are very high. It has a much higher smoke point. So for things like deep frying or higher temperature applications as a substitute for olive oil, it is better.
And I shared a link because the science-based MD I follow, he has a list of oils, and what is kind of totally out now are the sunflower, safflower, all those vegetable oils, because
Yeah.
they are omega-6s and they are really bad. And he even uh, uh, he even recommends you can use butter as long as it is grass-fed. because the grass-fed butter also has healthy omega 3s. And also, last time we did like olives overall class couple of weeks ago. Sorry guys, you didn't get the Zoom link. And we discussed how the Mediterranean diet, people in Mediterranean, how much was it? 6 or 8 gallons per person per
Yeah,
year.
something in that neighborhood. I think it was 6 gallons. Yeah.
Yeah, and also I just thank you so much, Nicholas. I just want to
Yeah, of
mention
course.
Nicholas has 2 more classes coming up on chocolate, types
Hmm.
of chocolate like the Dutch processing and another processing,
Hmm.
history of, and also wellness benefits of chocolate because
Yeah,
chocolate is one of those superfoods.
it is.
So,
Hmm.
so yes, Nicholas does allow us to record these sessions.
Hmm.
However, we do have some speakers who do not give us the intellectual property of recording their sessions. One of them is the upcoming chef from New York. She does seasonal cooking classes for us, and her classes are never recorded. So just make sure you don't rely on recording and you will attend in person. So if there are no other questions, thank you so much, Nicholas. This was very helpful. Oops,
You're
there's
welcome.
one
My
more
pleasure. I'm
person.
glad to hear it.
One more person attending. I took care of your attendance, so thank you very much, and see you on the 24th. I will
Yeah.
remind them to send you the Zoom link. Thank
Yeah.
you very much, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. See you next time.